You know, all the great Buffalo Sabres defensemen of the 1970s, this is probably one of the guys that got away. When Garry Lariviere finally retired from hockey after several seasons in the WHA and the NHL, he done so being one of the best defensive defensemen of his era. Very steady. He was original Quebec Nordique in the 1980 season and eventually ended up in Edmonton, be part of that strong defensive core or secondary core that included Lee Fogelin and and other young players. Now, born in St. Catharines, first came to major prominence with the St. Catharines Saints, St. Catharines Blackhawks, OHA Junior League. Eventually led him to be drafted 83rd overall in the 74 draft. Now, he played with St. Catharines in the Memorial Cup that year. In that 74 season, very rugged, 3 goals, 35 assists for 38 points. Now, he decided not to sign with Buffalo, but went to the Phoenix Roadrunners. The Chicago Cougars had took him in 74, but Phoenix had his rights. He played the majority of the 75 season in Tulsa in the CHL before joining Phoenix for 1 game in the playoffs after 4 games of regular season. 76 and 77, he played again with Phoenix, put up some decent numbers, 24 and 30 points. Now, 77, he found himself in the Quebec Nordiques and won an Avco Cup with them that year. Good playoff run, 10 assists in 17 games. Now, Quebec retained him for the new season to have a veteran presence, then found his way to Edmonton, where a lot of people felt that they didn't give him enough of a shot in Edmonton because they were loaded with 6 or 7 defensemen ahead of him. But with all the injuries and the player movement that Edmonton went through, he got a really good deal. Now, he was eventually traded by Quebec to Vancouver for Mary Marois on March 10th, 1981. The deal was part of a 3-way deal in which Vancouver immediately sent Lariviere and Ken Barry to Edmonton for Blair McDonald and the rights of Lars Gunnar Pettersson at the NHL trade deadline. Now, he was hampered with knee and back injuries in his last 2 seasons in the NHL. Now, what was kind of ironic, his first NHL game was also the first game in the history of the Quebec-Colorado franchise. Won the Avco Cup in 77 with Quebec. He was the Cunningham Award winner MVP in 84 at St. Catharines. After he left the NHL, he was the top defenseman in the AHL in 84, made an all-star team that year as well. CHL all-star first team in 75, and also coached in St. Catharines from 84 to 86 as player assistant. Now, he's the father of former Ontario Junior A-B player and a former OHL draft pick, Trevor Lariviere. Now, 6 feet, 190, very, very solid. He did not sign with Buffalo, like I said. The Islanders did regain his rights. He was traded by Buffalo to the Islanders for the rights to Jerry Desjardins in February 1975. But Quebec had a retainment pick, so he immediately took him back as part of his privilege to protect 3 players from his WHA franchise. Now, Lariviere doesn't really stand out. You wouldn't think a guy who played with Mark Tardif and Wayne Gretzky and Yuri Corey and Cloutier and Bernier and all these great players could hide. My good friend Alan Globinski, former Quebec Nordique, has said the Quebec presence on the team was quite strong, but he was one of the few non-Quebec francophones that played with the Nordiques during that era, and it was quite interesting how it played out. Now, if you look at the old YouTube, you're going to say to yourself, what is a French player playing with the Edmonton Oilers for? That's the first thing that stands out. First time I saw him, I literally said, well, wasn't that the same, Lariviere that won the Avco Cup in 77? A very good stay-at-home defenseman, like a Rod Langway style, but less goals, and a Rick Green style with more goals. But Buffalo took a good chance at him. They should have kept him because there were a lot of defensive plays that the Sabres kind of lost out in the 1970s in the road because he was well into WHA. I don't think he wanted to play in Buffalo. That's what we heard through our media sources at the time. So that's the story of the lost Sabre defenseman, Garry Lariviere. If you like what you're doing here, ladies and gentlemen, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And don't forget, keep your stick in the ice. Have a good one. Bye.